I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone that I am a big fan of horror. I have been from a young age. There's a lot of things I was probably watching and reading much younger than I should have done. But it's been something that I've loved throughout my life, clearly. And I've talked on this channel about my love of anthology horror in multiple ways. And of course, I do touch on metatextual horror quite frequently, and that is still something I'm going to do more of. I keep saying it, but there are more coming, I promise. But there's a few things that I've not really touched much on. You know, I've got a few haunting things here and there, which I do like. I do like slasher films, zombie-based stuff. Obviously, I've done Shaun of the Dead, so cross-genres also. But one of the things I don't think I've really touched on at all is Lovecraftian and cosmic horror, which technically I know are two separate entities, but there is a lot of crossover. A lot of cosmic horror draws on Lovecraft. There are Lovecraft stories that don't deal with the cosmic, but for the most part, I think, they are kind of hand in hand, and a lot of people do see them together. I think the fact that two of my favourite films that I haven't talked about on this channel, and I'm more than happy to if people want me to, are In the Mouth of Madness and Event Horizon. One, purely about reality bending and going mad, and there is an element of perhaps old ones and stuff like that in there. And the other is literally cosmic horror. It's in space, you go through hell, and stuff goes bad. Maybe, though, it's a love of Sam Neill films, because he's in both of those. No, I think it's cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror. But of course that leads me to today's entry, and because of how we have to put the title of what we're talking about in the title so people will actually come and watch, it's going to be of no surprise to anyone when I say that we're looking at 2001's Dagon, directed by Stuart Gordon, who also did, amongst other things, Reanimator, so we know he loves his Lovecraft, and stars Ezra Godden, Macarena Gomez, and the late Francisco Paco Rabanne. And I do want to talk about Paco Rabanne a bit later on, but we'll get to that because there's a moment that really touched me regarding him. But we have Ezra Godden playing Paul, who is a guy who's kind of done quite well in life, doing some kind of financial job. He's sort of balancing books. He's very much about binary options, so no one tell him about the gender identity revolution, please. It might blow his mind. But he's going out to an island, with his girlfriend Barbara and their friends Howard and Vicky. And a storm hits, and he needs to go and get help. So him and Barbara go and try and find someone to help them in the town of Imboca. And that's the first thing I really want to sort of elaborate on in this film. Because I'm not alone in this. I know a lot of other people go, it's called Dagon, but it takes a lot of its plot, in fact, almost all of its plot, from Shadow over Innsmouth instead. And the name of the town, Imboca, is a Spanish equivalent to Innsmouth. This I know because Boca is mouth. I did a sort of backwards tracking it that way. But it doesn't matter, it's still the deep ones in play, so it's fine. Dagon is a much more interesting title than Shadow over Innsmouth for some people. A lot of people will come because they don't know what that is. They'll be intrigued by the name. It's all marketing, I'm sure. But yeah, so he comes to this place, and he goes back with a fisherman who looks very, very weird and odd and kind of almost a bit clammy to the touch, which I think is our first hint that something's amiss, whilst Barbara stays behind and gets kidnapped. Of course, seeing that Howard and Vicky don't seem to have made it, he goes back and then starts his search for Barbara and meeting everyone else who he comes into contact with. And Ezra Godden does a great job. He plays the silliness of it because, when you're talking cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror, there are a lot of silly elements. And Stuart Gordon clearly has shown that he embraces the silliness, like I said before, with Reanimator in particular. But he does pay proper tribute to Lovecraft where it's needed. But Ezra Godden does also do the indignant, upset, scared acting well. I think he's better at the comedy, I will say. He's definitely got good comedy chops, but he isn't just a one-trick pony, and he sells every scene he's in rather well. And eventually, of course, he meets Ushia, the priestess of the Deep One Dagon. And this is someone he's been having, I was going to say nightmares, but they only really end badly. The rest of it is rather pleasant, I think, we'd say. She's played wonderfully by Macarena Gomez. She doesn't blink throughout the entire thing. This is something I noticed when I was making the notes for this video. And I was like, am I going crazy or does she not blink? I realised it about halfway through, like from her actual involvement. But I didn't want to go back and check, so I did look that up. And yes, there was a direction from Stuart Gordon. Any scene she's in, don't blink. Which is why some shots of her might seem really short. It might be because she's holding her eyes open for so many takes. It becomes kind of painful and strained after a while. So I think there are some scenes where it does cut off maybe sooner than ideal because it was just too painful for her to keep looking. That's my belief anyway. But it just sells it. I mean, she has such a... I've seen pictures of her normally and she does just have like a very interesting beauty. But here she's got an almost like intense and ethereal beauty at the same time, which sounds really contradictory, but welcome to Lovecraft. There's something about it that is drawing you in, but also making you feel unsettled. And that's brilliant. You know, like I say, her normal pictures of her, if you look on her IMDb page, you wouldn't think anything like was uncomfortable about it. But how it's lit, how she's made up, and like I say, the never blinking, I think just sell it entirely. But even later in the film where she's pleading with Paul to stay with her because, you know, you're my lover and my half-brother, so we're destined to be together. Incest, yay. You know, how she does that scene, the intensity of her pleading with Paul to just give in and come back with her is really compelling watching. You know, this is a film that has a lot of jank to it. Like I said before with the fisherman, you know, he gets on the boat and a hook goes in his hand and you can clearly tell that's a fake hand. But also it's a nice metaphor of how he's been caught by the island. But there are these things, and you know, like, I mean, as run down as the town looks, you know, it's not beautiful by any way, shape or form. And it's obviously not meant to be. There's a lot that I think a casual watcher would possibly instinctively want to turn off from, but I implore people not to, because it is really compelling viewing. But of course, one of the greatest people that Paul meets in his journey, and I did want to talk about this in detail, is Ezekiel, played by Francisco Rabal. And he is just, well, as he said himself, he's, you know, the crazy town drunk. And of course, because alcohol is known to dehydrate, he's not interesting to the fish people. I'm guessing that's the reason why anyway. There's a logical reason to it. I don't know if it's just, we'll put that in there because he's crazy and drunk, who'd want that? But I think there is technically a good scientific backing to it. But he's just such a great character, Ezekiel. You know, he really leans into that role. I don't know much of Francisco Rabal's work outside of this, but something about Ezekiel is just compelling. I don't know if it's our weird social leaning towards, you know, sort of flawed but kind old men. There's something like sort of grandfatherly about that I think we are drawn to in a weird way. But I think he just says, you know, one of the best lines, and I think it's a line to live by. And like I sometimes do, I always think it's better coming out of the source's mouth. So take it away if you would, Ezekiel.
Drink see, loco see, but I tell you true.
But there is a scene later on where, you know, they've been captured and he's being sort of skinned. And, you know, he's reciting the psalm with Paul. And it's a really hard-hitting moment. And I think it is because this was one of his last films. This film itself is dedicated to his memory. And, you know, again, there's that kindly, flawed old man thing, the grandfather, like, instinct, I guess. You know, with a simulated death scene, knowing that the guy didn't survive much after this film. I think it all comes together, and it really... I don't know if anyone else has seen it and hasn't had this, I'd love to know. I don't know if it's just me being a bit oversensitive. But it really got me. It was a really hard moment, the first time and the second time, because I knew he'd passed. You know, the first time I'd watching it as well. But the fact that a film that's, you know, clearly not, you know, top flight, you know, blockbuster level, it's clearly on a pretty low budget, and they're doing what they can. I mean, some of the creature designs are great for the money they had. The CGI's kind of a bit ropey, but it was 2001, so we kind of let that slide. But a film of this quality level should not evoke such a big response, and the fact that it does, I think, is testament to the filmmaker's passion and dedication to this piece. There's even things like the sort of setups that are followed through on, which again requires a lot of passion and dedication. There's a thing that Paul keeps doing as the film progresses. He's rubbing his side, sort of just below his rib cage, and later on we see that that's because his sort of weird like lower body gills were coming in. So all these little touches that are in there, there's so many little moments that actually build up towards the end, and not all of it's like in your face constantly. You know, there are subtle things that build up, and I'm a sucker for a passion project, basically. I think anything where people have put time and effort in and really wanted the project to do well and put their all into it, did the best they can with what they had, that will win me over more than a multi-million into billion-dollar production that has no heart. And I think if you've never seen Dagon, go out and do yourself a favour. If you've seen it, give it a rewatch with a new angle of like thinking of how low the bar was, and that the fact that they just propelled themselves way over it. They could have just stepped over the bar, it was that low, but they decided to propel themselves up. And I think this is a must watch for anyone as a fan of Lovecraft's work and just want something that isn't, mass produced. So I'll be back next time with Buffy, and then after that, a film that probably shouldn't have been made, but people technically wanted it, and it has kind of gained a bit of a cult following afterwards, but I will leave it there. So all that remains is for me to say, as always, thank you for watching, and take care.
House Dagon!
Yes.